Imagine a traumatized teenage girl, just bleeding, her face is horribly scarred, and she's standing completely alone in this dense, milky fog on a frozen lake.
Right.
She doesn't have an army. She has no armor. I mean, she's armed with literally nothing but a sword and a pair of rusty ice skates.
Yeah, it's a striking image.
And now imagine that the fate of an entire continent, millions of gold pieces, armies of 300,000 men, the survival of these massive empires, and even the very fabric of space and time, all of it hinges entirely on whether she survives the next 5 minutes.
It really is the ultimate bottleneck of history, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at a scenario where the absolute highest levels of geopolitical maneuvering they crash headfirst into this visceral, muddy individual survival.
Yeah.
The people at the top, the emperors, the archmages, the spy masters, they all think they're playing this clean game of chess. They believe they control the board.
Right. But the reality is that the board's completely out of their hands.
Exactly. And that collision is exactly what we are unpacking today.
Yes, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We are looking at a massive, intricate stack of source material today. I mean, we've got intercepted spy reports, transcripts from imperial tribunals, the diaries of hermits living out in swamps, and even the telepathic visions of priestesses.
It's quite a collection.
It is. And our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how the sweeping decisions of kings and, the deployment of massive military machines, how all of that connects to that single desperate girl on the ice.
And before we even get into that, we really have to acknowledge how fragile our understanding of these events actually is.
Oh, right, the paper.
Yes. The sources themselves reveal this fascinating, almost terrifying detail. I mean, we only possess the bulk of this historical record because of an accident.
Let me guess. Dandelion.
Precisely. A poet named Dandelion literally stumbled upon a cache of paper and pencils that had been stolen from a Lyrian military convoy.
Wow.
Yeah, just that tiny random discovery, just finding the physical materials to write with in a war zone that gave rise to his life's work of recording these specific events.
That's insane.
Without that stolen military stationery, this entire era, the secret meetings, the hidden atrocities, it all would have just vanished into the dark.
It completely reframes how we think about history, doesn't it? I mean, it's not set in stone. It's literally written on stolen paper by a guy who just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
It really does.
So, if you are listening to this, you might be trying to catch up on history, or maybe you are just fascinated by the raw mechanics of power. But I promise you, we are going to get into the absolute mud of how power actually operates here.
Oh, you definitely are.
By the end of this conversation, you will never look at a pair of ice skates the same way again.
But to get to the ice skates, we first have to understand the sheer scale of the forces hunting this girl.
Right. Her name is Ciri, the Cintran princess.
Exactly. And before we get to her physical survival, we need to examine the massive war machine moving the pieces around her. We have to look at the highest echelons of power, taxation, and international finance.
So we are starting in Kovir, specifically Lon Exeter, the winter capital of Kovir.
Yes.
And the sources paint this incredible picture of a city built entirely on water. It sits on this broad river estuary, and instead of streets, it has canals. But here's the detail that just stopped me in my tracks. The architecture.
Ah, the housing.
Yeah. Buildings are incredibly narrow, incredibly tall, and deeply ornate, and they're all just stacked tightly against each other right along the canals. And the reason for this isn't aesthetic at all. It's entirely driven by tax law.
Taxation dictates the literal physical reality of the city.
Oh, wild.
In Lon Exeter, property taxes are assessed based strictly on the width of a house's frontage facing the canal. So naturally, the architects build the narrowest possible frontages and extend the houses deep into the block.
Right.
It's a brilliant detail that tells you everything you need to know about the Koviri mindset. I mean, this is a nation built on commerce, extreme pragmatism, and exploiting loopholes.
But, they weren't always this economic powerhouse. When I was looking through the historical background in the sources, it seemed like Kovir started out as a joke.
It essentially was.
It was this discarded, seemingly useless fiefdom belonging to the massive kingdom of Redania. The Redanian king basically just handed it over to his unwanted brother Troyden just to get him out of the capital.
Just threw it away.
Right, because it was a barren land of sand, salt, and seawater. The land was considered so utterly worthless that the king of Redania didn't even bother making Troyden swear a formal feudal oath.
Which is just a catastrophic administrative error in hindsight.
Oh, completely.
The Redanian crown essentially gave away sovereignty out of sheer arrogance. They assumed a desert of salt could never pose a threat.
I look at it like a tiny tech startup operating out of a frozen garage.
Yeah.
All the biggest established companies, the Redanias of the world, they laugh at them. They forget this startup even exists.
That's a good way to frame it.
But then, this frozen little startup discovers they are sitting on the equivalent of the global servers. I mean, scholars, rogue engineers, miners, and misfits, anyone who doesn't fit into the rigid feudal structures of the South, they all flock to Kovir.
And they start digging.
Exactly. And what they find changes the world economy overnight.
The extraction numbers mentioned in the sources are just staggering. Within a few generations, Kovir is extracting a quarter of the continent's silver, lead, and tin.
Wow.
They pull out half of the world's copper. And crucially, they produce 80% of the world's gold.
80%.
80%. They corner the global market in raw minerals and glass manufacturing. They are no longer a startup. They are the central bank and the primary industrial manufacturer for the entire continent combined.
And, well, of course, the moment the startup becomes a trillion-dollar company, the parent company comes knocking.
Naturally.
King Radovid of Redania suddenly remembers his quote-unquote vassal and decides it is time Kovir paid a massive tithe.
And Kovir refuses.
Right, so Redania enacts trade embargoes. When that fails, Redania launches a massive military intervention to bring their rogue province back into the fold.
And the Redanian army is absolutely decimated.
Just crushed.
Because they fail to understand the mechanism of Kovir's new power. Kovir doesn't rely on a traditional feudal levy, untrained peasants with pitchforks. Kovir simply opens its bottomless treasury and hires a massive, highly disciplined, professional mercenary army.
They just buy the win.
Exactly. They buy the best armor, the best weapons, and the best commanders. Redania is crushed, which forces them to sign the First Exeter Treaty.
Now, this treaty seems to be the absolute cornerstone of everything that happens next.
It is. The First Exeter Treaty establishes Kovir's absolute neutrality and total independence. The core political and cultural tenet of Kovir becomes this Latin phrase, pacta sunt servanda.
Agreements must be kept.
Yes. They realize that their economic dominance relies entirely on their reputation as an impartial, reliable trading partner. They worship free trade and absolute neutrality. Breaking a treaty is the one thing they will not do.
So let's bring this to the present crisis in the sources. We have this massive threat from the south. The Nilfgaardian Empire is sweeping across the continent, gobbling up kingdoms one by one.
Right.
Redania, the old parent company, is in deep trouble. Their king has recently been assassinated. They're being ruled by this chaotic regency council, and they desperately need funding to build a cavalry force to stop the Nilfgaardian advance.
So Redania sends their super spy.
Yeah, the head of their intelligence apparatus, this massive, physically imposing man named Dijkstra, he goes to Lon Exeter. He secures a private audience with King Estrad Thyssen of Kovir.
And Dijkstra is there with a very specific, calculated request. He isn't asking for Kovir's army. He is asking for exactly 1 million Byzants.
Just hard cash.
Exactly. He needs hard currency to hire his own mercenaries, buy horses, and equip a cavalry capable of breaking the Nilfgaardian lines.
Wait, I'm struggling with this part, though.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, King Estrad has 80% of the world's gold. He is an absolute monarch. He looks at the map and sees Nilfgaard advancing.
Right.
He is an incredibly smart man. He knows Nilfgaard is eventually going to come for Kovir's wealth. So why does he care about the letter of the law in an old treaty? Why not just burn the treaty, hand Dijkstra the million Byzants, and stop the empire before they reach his borders?
Because that is the exact trap Estrad is avoiding. If he simply hands over the gold, he commits an act of war. Kovir currently holds a non-aggression and trade treaty with the Nilfgaardian Empire. The specific text of that treaty explicitly forbids Kovir from supporting Nilfgaard's enemies with military aid or state funds.
Okay.
If Estrad officially violates his neutrality, he gives Emperor Emir of Nilfgaard a legal casus belli, a universally recognized justification for war.
But Nilfgaard is already conquering everyone. I mean, does a legal justification really matter to an empire that aggressive?
Oh, absolutely it does. Geopolitics relies on optics and precedent. If Kovir breaks the treaty first, Nilfgaard can frame their eventual invasion of Kovir as a lawful punitive action.
Ah, I see.
It prevents other neutral nations from intervening on Kovier's behalf. And furthermore, Esterrad's entire economy relies on other nations trusting that Kovier honors its contracts. If he breaks a treaty with Nilfgaard today, why should any trading partner trust him tomorrow?
That makes sense.
Esterrad is a political genius. He tells Dijkstra no. He will not provide state funds. He will not provide his state army.
He leaves Dijkstra completely hanging. But, Estrad clearly wants to help.
Yeah.
The sources describe him going to his private chambers that night. He's pacing. He's talking to his wife, Queen Zuleika.
Yes.
And apparently they actually share a bed, which the text notes is incredibly rare for monarchs who usually have separate wings of the palace. It really shows a genuine partnership.
It does.
So Esterrad is complaining that he needs a loophole. He needs to fund Redania without leaving a single fingerprint.
And the loophole comes from Zuleika. She is an intensely devout woman currently reading a religious text containing the wisdom of the prophet Lebioda. While Esterrad is stressing over international finance and treaty law, Zuleika reads him a parable. It's the parable of the impish cat.
Okay, I need you to break this down because it sounds like a children's story, but apparently it dictates the fate of a continent.
It really does. The parable goes like this. A pupil approaches the prophet. The pupil has a neighbor who desperately wants the pupil's beloved dog.
Right.
The pupil loves the dog and does not want to part with it, but he also cannot afford to offend his neighbor who is powerful. So the prophet asks the pupil, "Do you have something you love less?"
Okay.
The pupil replies, "I have an impish cat, a tiresome pest that destroys my belongings." The prophet tells him, "Take that impish cat and give it to your neighbor. You'll rid yourself of a pest and you will delight your neighbor, because most often a neighbor does not actually desire a specific gift, but simply desires to be given something."
So how does an absolute monarch translate a story about a pest into military logistics?
Esterrad hears this and immediately sees the political architecture of his loophole. He cannot give Redania his own standing Koviri army, that is his beloved dog.
Right.
And he cannot give them money directly from the state treasury. But he realizes he possesses an enormous surplus of impish cats.
His prisons.
Exactly. Kovir's prisons and internment camps are overflowing with political dissidents, captured mercenaries, troublemakers, and seasoned veterans who fought in previous border skirmishes.
Wow.
These are dangerous people, but they are also highly trained combatants who deeply hate Nilfgaard or, simply love fighting for pay.
Let me stop you there, though. Esterrad can't just ship prisoners of war to Redania. That's still a state action. Nilfgaard would see right through it.
But he doesn't ship them. He legally banishes them.
Oh.
Esterrad issues a mass sweeping royal pardon to thousands of these incarcerated fighters. But the condition of the pardon is immediate exile from Koviri's soil. He legally expels them from his country as undesirable elements.
That is brilliant.
Once they cross the border, they are free agents. They immediately flood south into Redania, people like the famous condottieri Julia Pretty Kitty Abate-Marco, who leads the Free Company.
Right.
They are looking for work, and Dijkstra happens to be waiting with open arms to hire them. Esterrad has just supplied Redania with a veteran army without deploying a single Koviri soldier.
Okay, that covers the manpower. But Dijkstra still needs the million bezants to actually pay these newly exiled mercenaries, to buy the armor, to buy the horses. How does Esterrad give them the money without breaking the treaty?
This is where we see a masterclass in economic laundering and plausible deniability. Esterrad does not use the Koviri Central Treasury. He taps into his personal, private wealth.
Okay.
But even then, a direct transfer of 1 million bezants from the king's personal account to the Redanian spy master leaves a massive paper trail. So he routes the money through maritime trade companies.
Wait, how does that hide the money? I mean, if I look at the ledger of the maritime company, I still see Estrad's investment.
Because the maritime trade companies he chooses are deeply, intrinsically tied to Nilfgaardian commerce.
Oh, wow.
Esterrad deliberately select shipping conglomerates that are co-owned or heavily invested in by prominent merchants from the Nilfgaardian Empire. These Nilfgaardian merchants are legally operating within the neutral Koviri ports.
So wait, Esterrad injects his capital into these joint ventures. The maritime companies suddenly have a massive surplus of liquidity. And then what?
The maritime companies then engage in complex financial maneuvers. They loan or transfer this newly acquired capital to a neutral, independent third party.
Jeez.
In this case, the hierarch of Novigrad, who runs a massive, ostensibly neutral banking and religious institution. The hierarch then officially loans that exact sum of money to the Redanian Regency Council.
I just want to make sure I'm grasping the sheer audacity of this.
It's quite something.
Esrod is taking his money, giving it to companies part owned by Nilfgaardians, who then send it to a neutral bank, which then hands it to Redonia. By the time the gold reaches Dijkstra, the paper trail shows that Nilfgaardian merchants effectively helped underwrite the loan.
That is the genius of it. If Emperor Emhyr investigates the funding of the Redanian army, he will find his own empire's merchants implicated in the financial chain.
That is incredible.
Estrad's hands are immaculately clean. He upheld the strict letter of the non-aggression treaty. No state funds were given, no state army was deployed, and yet he has fully armed and financed the resistance against Nilfgaard.
And there's this great cynical line he delivers to Queen Zuleika. After he sets all this in motion, he tells her, "Cats always come home." What does he mean by that?
It's the final stroke of economic brilliance. He knows that if this Redanian mercenary army wins, they will capture immense spoils of war from the Nilfgaardians. They will be incredibly wealthy. And where do wealthy mercenaries go to spend their spoils, buy estates, and invest in a stable economy? They go back to the neutral, safe haven of Kovir. Esterad is financing an army that will eventually bring foreign wealth right back to his tax collectors. It is a closed-loop system of geopolitical profit.
It is staggering. We are looking at a master architect moving massive abstract forces capital, legal definitions, exile.
Absolutely.
But the sources don't just show us the northern perspective. We also get to see the view from the other side of the chessboard, from deep inside the Nilfgaardian Empire. And the mechanism for this intelligence gathering is fascinating. We witness a conversation via a megascope.
Yes, this brings us to the sorceresses. We have Asirvar Anahid, a Nilfgaardian mage, and Philippa Eilhart, a northern mage. They are secretly communicating across thousands of miles.
And we really need to explain what a megascope is, because it's not just like a magical FaceTime. The sources describe it as an incredibly taxing, complex piece of arcane machinery.
It's very dangerous.
Yeah, it requires a massive crystalline structure, precise alignments, and a localized source of chaotic magical energy.
It's a highly volatile technology. Using a megascope requires the mage to channel raw magical force through their own body to stabilize the connection. It exacts a physical toll.
Right.
You can suffer severe neurological damage or retinal burning if the alignment is off. The fact that Asir and Philippa are risking this level of magical exposure tells you how critical the intelligence is.
And the intelligence Asir is passing along comes from a spy named Cantarella. Cantarella is embedded in the absolute highest levels of Nilfgaard. She is the mistress of Vatier de Rudeau, the head of Nilfgaardian military intelligence.
Exactly.
She is literally sleeping in his bed, listening to him talk in his sleep, or reading his documents while he rests.
This perfectly highlights the delicate, deeply compromised web of information in this world. The head of Nilfgaardian intelligence is compromised by his own mistress, who feeds information to a Nilfgaardian sorceress, who is secretly allied with a northern sorceress.
It's a massive chain.
And through this chain, we learn the truth about Emperor Emhyr's plans. He isn't planning a series of border skirmishes. He is preparing a spring offensive of unprecedented, terrifying scale.
The numbers mentioned are staggering. 300,000 men.
Massive.
Let's really think about the logistics of that. We aren't just talking about men holding swords. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of horses needing forage. We're talking about supply lines stretching across a continent, blacksmiths, siege engines, naval support.
It's a tidal wave.
Yeah, an absolute tidal wave of steel and flesh preparing to sweep north, targeting Temeria, Redania, and the coastal nations.
Emhyr is aiming for total, absolute conquest. The logistics alone dictate that his armies must keep moving, consuming the resources of the conquered territories to sustain themselves.
So we have Estrad laundering millions in gold and Emhyr mobilizing 300,000 troops. But here is where the sources make a massive, violent pivot.
Yes, down to the ground level.
Exactly. All of these grand strategies, the clean ledgers, the troop movements, they mean absolutely nothing without securing the ultimate political prize. And that prize is Ciri, the Cintran princess. We are moving away from the clean marble of palaces and the high-level spycraft right down into the mud.
Because Emperor Emhyr needs Ciri. She is the legitimate heir to the throne of Cintra, a crucial northern kingdom. By capturing her and marrying her, Emhyr legally cements his control over the conquered northern territories.
She is the geopolitical linchpin.
She is, but Emhyr isn't the only one hunting her.
This brings us to a character named Johanna Selborn, though everyone calls her Kenna. The way we meet Kenna in the sources is incredibly tense.
It really
We
is.
are reading the transcripts of an imperial tribunal. She is a prisoner, standing before military judges, fighting for her life, trying to explain how she ended up involved in a treasonous conspiracy.
Now, Kenna is a psionic. Specifically, she possesses rare talents as a telepath and a telempath.
Let's break down exactly how telepathy operates in this context. It's not just hearing voices.
No, it's much more intrusive and dangerous. Telepathy is the reading of surface thoughts or projecting one's own thoughts. Telepathy is the ability to sense, absorb, and manipulate raw emotional states.
Wow.
Kenna can walk into a room and instantly feel the terror, the rage, or the deception of everyone around her. She can track a person purely by the emotional signature they leave behind in an environment.
Because of this rare skill, she gets recruited by a man named Dr. Silifant into what is known as a Hansa.
A Hansa is essentially a highly specialized, heavily armed gang. They operate as pacifiers, bounty hunters, and depth cover operatives. They do the brutal, unsanctioned wet work that the regular army cannot touch.
Right.
And this particular Hansa is commanded by a very dangerous individual, Stefan Skellen.
Skellen holds the official title of Imperial Coroner, and he goes by the pseudonym Tawny Owl. But his official title is a front. And here, we really need to pause and establish the boundaries of our analysis regarding the political frameworks presented in the sources.
Good idea.
The text explicitly presents two deeply opposed systems of government battling for control.
On one side, we have Emperor Emhyr, who represents absolute autocracy, imperialism, and the centralization of all power in a single ruler.
Right.
On the other side, we have Stefan Skellen. Skellen is secretly using his position to plot a massive coup against the emperor. His stated goal is to completely dismantle the autocracy. He wants to replace it initially with a constitutional monarchy, but his ultimate stated ambition is to establish a true democracy. He speaks of power to the people, representation, and destroying the aristocracy.
And to be absolutely clear for you listening, we are analyzing this strictly as it appears in the source text.
Yeah.
We are impartially dissecting these two competing ideologies.
Yes.
We are not endorsing Emperor Emhyr's autocracy, nor are we taking the side of Skellen's democratic conspiracy. We are examining the mechanics of their conflict and how these lofty political ideals drive the characters to commit horrific acts.
And that is the crucial paradox of Stefan Skellen. He espouses the highest, most progressive political ideals in this world. He speaks eloquently about human rights and the necessity of democratic representation.
But look at his methods.
Exactly. To achieve this utopia, he hires the absolute dregs of humanity. His Hansa is composed of sociopaths, rapists, murderers, and disgraced mercenaries.
Take that a step further, though. How does killing a teenage girl lead to democracy?
Skellen understands the geopolitical bottleneck we discussed earlier. Emhyr's hold over the northern territories and the loyalty of his own generals relies heavily on his plan to marry Ciri and secure the Sintran bloodline.
Okay.
If Skellen intercepts Ciri before the Emperor finds her and assassinates her, Emhyr's political alliances crumble. The failure will weaken the Emperor enough for Skellen's co-conspirators in the military and aristocracy to launch their coup. So Skellen's path to democracy requires the brutal murder of a traumatized child.
And when you hire the worst scum of the earth to do your dirty work, you inevitably lose control of the leash. Skellen doesn't just hire his own Hansa, he contracts out bounties. And that is how a common bounty hunter named Leo Bonhart intercepts the world's most valuable political pawn before Skellen does.
We hear about Bonhart through the testimony of a terrified messenger boy named Niklar. Niklar witnesses Bonhart in action, and it is a scene of utter butchery.
Bonhart is hunting a notorious gang of teenage bandits known as the Rats. Ciri had fallen in with them, going by the alias Fulka. Bonhart tracks the Rats to a village, and he doesn't just defeat them, he systematically slaughters them in front of Ciri.
Horrific.
Niklar describes Bonhart literally sawing off their heads to collect the bounties, throwing the severed heads into a sack. But he leaves Ciri alive.
Crucially, Bonhart does not know Ciri's true identity at this point. He doesn't know she is a princess or the key to the empire. He simply knows that two different clients are paying a massive bounty for her capture. He views her merely as a highly valuable piece of meat.
The physical description of Bonhart is something that sticks with you like a nightmare. He is extremely tall, incredibly thin, almost skeletal, but it's his eyes.
Yes, the eyes.
The text describes his eyes like a dead, fish-watery orbs with a black core, completely devoid of empathy, entirely motionless. Ciri later says that those dead, staring eyes terrified her far more than the physical beatings. He is the walking embodiment of sociopathic cruelty.
And he inflicts a systematic psychological and physical dismantling on Ciri. It isn't just about restraining a prisoner. He beats her severely. He buys a heavy iron dog collar and forces her to wear it, chaining her to a hitching post outside taverns.
It's just sickening.
He forces her to fight in a gladiatorial arena for the amusement of his cousin. At one point, he strips her completely naked in front of a tavern crowd to search her for magical amulets. He strips away every shred of her dignity, her autonomy, and her humanity.
And this creates a terrifying bottleneck of evil. Because Bonhart has gone rogue, he realizes Ciri is more valuable than his initial contract with Skellen implied. So Skellen and his Hansa are now actively tracking Bonhart.
Yeah.
Using Kenna's telepathy, Skellen's group is following the emotional trail of terror and violence left in Bonhart's wake. But Kenna realizes someone else is tracking them. A magical spy.
They track this magical signature to a village called Unicorn. Skellen's men know an invisible spy is in the room with them, and how they capture him is both bizarre and incredibly practical.
The pancake treatment.
Yes.
I was reading this and had to reread it to make sure I understood the physics of it. They know the spy is using a high-level invisibility spell, but invisibility only bends light around the biological form of the caster. That doesn't eliminate their physical mass.
Right.
So Skellen's men surround the center of the room with buckets of heavy cream and flour. On command, they hurl the flour and cream into the empty air.
The magic bends light, but it cannot stop physical matter from adhering to the caster. The wet flour and cream coat the invisible spy, instantly outlining a human shape in white paste.
That is so clever.
Before the spy can react or cast a shield, they hit the flour-covered shape with a heavy iron frying pan, knocking him unconscious. They tie him to a table and the invisibility fades.
The spy turns out to be a sorcerer named Rience. And Rience is not operating alone. He is the cruel, sadistic lackey of an even more powerful rogue archmage named Vilgefortz.
So let's look at the convergence in this village of Unicorn. Skellen has captured Rience, and at that exact moment, Bonhart rides into the village courtyard, dragging Ciri on the heavy chain.
Oh, man.
Suddenly, the three greatest immediate evils in Ciri's life, Skellen the political conspirator, Bonhart the sociopathic bounty hunter, and Rience the magical torturer, are all sitting around the same table.
And Ciri is outside. She's chained to a wooden post in the freezing cold, covered in bruises, bleeding, listening through a window as these three men decide her fate.
It's so tense.
Rience realizes he's outnumbered by Skellen's mercenaries, so he produces a magical communication device called a xenogloss.
A xenogloss is a rare, highly encrypted magical artifact, essentially a direct, secure line to his master. Through the xenogloss, the voice of the Archmage Vilgefortz projects into the room.
What follows is one of the most chilling transactional negotiations I have ever read. Vilgefortz doesn't negotiate from a position of weakness. He casually drops a nuclear bomb on the conversation.
He really does.
He reveals Ciri's true identity to Skellen and Bonhart. He tells them she isn't just a political pawn, she is the child of the Elder Blood.
The Elder Blood is a genetic, magical mutation of immense world-breaking power. Vilgefortz wants her for a purpose that makes political assassinations look tame.
What does he want to do?
He intends to surgically extract her placenta and womb. He believes that by harnessing the biological source of the Elder Blood, he can achieve literal godhood, manipulating the fabric of space and time.
That is horrifying.
He proposes an alliance between the three of them, which he dubs the Societas Leonina the Lion's Partnership.
Let's break down the terms of this partnership, because it highlights the complete objectification of Ciri.
Yes, let's look at it.
Vilgefortz tells Skellen, "Give me the girl, and I will use my magical influence to ensure your democratic coup succeeds, and I will make you the head of the Imperial Secret Service."
And then Bonhart.
Yeah, he tells Bonhart, "Give me the girl, and I will give you unimaginable wealth, and as a bonus, I will let you stand in the laboratory and watch as I surgically dissect her."
They are bartering with a human being's organs to achieve democracy, wealth, and godhood. But to truly understand the sheer terror of what Ciri is running from, to understand what awaits her if she fails to escape, we have to look at what is currently happening in Vilgefortz's hidden laboratory.
Because Ciri isn't the only victim in this web. We have to talk about Yennefer. Yennefer is an incredibly powerful sorceress, and she is essentially an adoptive mother to Ciri.
Wildschwartz has managed to capture Yennefer, and the physical description of Wildschwartz here is important. In a previous encounter months ago, Ciri escaped him by stepping through an unstable, corrupted magical portal.
Right, I remember that.
The portal collapsed and violently exploded directly in Wildschwartz's face.
So he is hideously mutilated. The sources describe his face as a ruin, held together by magical metallic clasps and wire. Where his left eye should be, there is a glowing magical crystal. He is operating out of pure malice, pain, and ruthless ambition.
Wildschwartz faces a technical problem, though. He needs to locate Ciri geographically, but standard magical scanners cannot find her. The elder blood in her veins creates a natural, chaotic, dampening field that scrambles conventional scrying magic.
But wait, if he can't scan for her, why capture Yennefer? Yennefer doesn't know where Ciri is.
She doesn't consciously know, but Wildschwartz is relying on emotional and empathetic resonance. Yennefer and Ciri share a profound, almost maternal bond. Wildschwartz intends to use Yennefer as a biological antenna.
Oh, no.
He forces her into a highly modified, torturous megascope setup.
The mechanics of this torture are clinical and horrifying. He drives long metallic needles directly into Yennefer's veins to tap into her nervous system.
That's brutal.
He clamps her head in a heavy iron vise to prevent her from moving. He is forcefully channeling massive surges of chaotic magical energy through her body, trying to forcibly rip the empathetic connection open to locate Ciri.
The pain is described as mind-shattering. It is stroke-inducing agony. He is systematically tearing her mind apart, looking for a frequency match to Ciri's emotional state.
But Yennefer refuses to break. The sheer willpower she displays is incredible. Despite her nervous system being lit on fire, she builds a mental fortress. She will not give up Ciri.
Not for a second.
The only thing she allows to slip through her mental defenses, the only image she projects into Wildschwartz's megascope, is a vision of the Witcher, Geralt.
Which is a brilliant act of defiance. Wildschwartz views people purely as tools, as biological components to be harvested. Yennefer uses the very human emotion of love, her love for Ciri and Geralt, to build an impenetrable wall against his clinical sadistic power.
It sets the ultimate stakes for everything that follows. If Ciri is caught by Skellen, she dies. If she is kept by Bonhart, she is a tortured slave. But if she is handed over to Wildschwartz, she faces that vice, those needles, and the surgical extraction of her womb.
And incredibly, back at the village of Unicorn, Ciri senses the walls closing in. She doesn't consciously know about Yennefer's torture, but she knows she is about to be sold to the highest bidder.
This brings us to a massive turning point. Kenna, the telepath in Skellen's crew, makes a catastrophic error in judgment. She decides she wants to probe Ciri's mind just to see what the girl knows.
Kenna reaches out with her telepathy, trying to slip into Ciri's consciousness. But Ciri had previously renounced her magical abilities while surviving in a desert months prior.
Right.
She had shut off her connection to magic. However, that power didn't vanish. It was just dammed up. When Kenna attempts to breach her mind, Ciri instinctively reacts in pure self-defense.
She doesn't just block Kenna. She violently pushes back. The latent, chaotic power of the elder blood surges through the psychic connection. The backlash is immense.
Yeah.
Kenna is instantly incapacitated, blown backwards, bleeding profusely from both nostrils, paralyzed on the sand, her mind completely overloaded.
It is Ciri's awakening. The months of trauma, the beatings, the dog collar, it all acts as a crucible. The dam breaks, and she seizes the chaos.
In the confusion of Kenna collapsing, Ciri acts. She manages to get on her horse, a massive black mare named Kelpie. Skellen's mercenaries panic. Some try to stop her, some try to kill each other because Skellen has a mutiny brewing in his ranks.
Total chaos.
Ciri rides Kelpie toward the outer wall of the courtyard and spectacularly jumps a solid 7-foot wooden gate.
It's an incredible escape, but it comes with a permanent cost. As Kelpie clears the gate, Stefan Skellen steps out of the tavern. He hurls an Orion a heavy, sharp, 6-pointed throwing star.
The Orion strikes Ciri directly in the face. It slices open her cheek from her eye to her jaw. She manages to hold on to the horse and escapes into the darkness, but she is bleeding heavily. She bears the permanent, disfiguring physical mark of that night.
She rides deep into the treacherous swamps, losing her pursuers. And eventually, near death from blood loss and infection, she stumbles upon a small, isolated cabin.
This is the cabin of an old hermit named Visogoda. And here, the sources shift gears dramatically. We move from a story of raw physical survival into one of the deepest, most compelling ethical debates I have ever encountered.
Vaisugoda is not just a swamp hermit. He is a disgraced former professor, a philosopher, an ethicist, and a surgeon. He was exiled decades ago for his radical views. He takes Ciri in. He stitches up her horribly mangled face, saving her life.
But as he heals her physical wound over the next few weeks, he realizes how deeply damaged she is psychologically. Ciri's transforming in that cabin.
Yes, she is.
She is shedding the identity of a victim. She discovers, through scouting the area, that Skellen's mercenaries have set up a trap. They are waiting for her in a tavern in a nearby village called Dundare. They are bored, waiting for winter to pass, knowing she must be hiding nearby.
Ciri decides she's not going to run anymore. She decides to go to Dundare and kill them.
She prepares for this. She literally takes a mixture of soot from the fireplace and goose fat, and she smears it around her eyes and over the horrible scar on her face.
It's a terrifying look.
It makes her eyes look like massive, bottomless black pits. She looks like a demon from a nightmare.
Vaisugoda is horrified. He begs her to stay. And he argues from the position of classical ethics. He tells her that revenge is a trap. It is an endless, self-perpetuating cycle of blood. If you kill them, their brothers will come for you.
Yeah, he appeals to higher morality.
Exactly, the philosophical ideals of justice, the sanctity of human life. He tells her that returning violence for violence corrupts the soul.
I want to stop here and ask you, if you're listening, to put yourself in Ciri's shoes for a second. Think about the worst, most systemic injustice you can imagine.
Truly.
Imagine being beaten, treated like an animal, having your friends decapitated in front of you. And then an old philosopher in a warm cabin tells you that you must take the high road to preserve your soul.
Ciri's response is devastating because it is born of undeniable reality. She rejects his entire philosophical framework.
She tells Vaisugoda, "You theoreticians write ethical treatises because you've never been tortured. You sit in your universities and invent morality because you haven't looked out the window. Evil doesn't fear ethics. Evil doesn't care about your treatises on justice. Evil doesn't care about the law."
Evil fears pain. That is her thesis.
She says, if you want to stop evil, you make it howl with pain, you chop off its hands, you gouge out its eyes. And her chilling conclusion is this: a villain with his hands chopped off and his eyes gouged out is no longer evil. He is just a bleeding lump of meat on the ground. He cannot hurt anyone ever again.
It is a flawless, completely terrifying logic. It is the absolute distillation of extreme trauma into a weaponized worldview. Vaisugoda, for all his learning, has no theoretical counter to this.
He really doesn't.
He cannot argue that Bonnhart or Skellen will respond to reason or justice, but he does offer one final, chilling warning.
What does he say?
He tells her that nature abhors a vacuum. He agrees that the bleeding lump on the ground is no longer evil, but he asks her, what fills the void? What does she become when she enacts this level of absolute merciless violence? Does the act of slaughtering the monster turn her into the very monster she is hunting?
And we don't get a theoretical answer because the debate ends there. Ciri leaves the cabin, and the philosophy instantly becomes a brutal, bloody reality. Ciri takes this new ideology of visceral retribution and unleashes it upon her pursuers.
We move to the massacre at Dundare, and the atmosphere the sources build here is critical.
It's Samhain Eve. This is a night deeply associated across multiple cultures in this world with ghosts, witchcraft, and the thinning of the veil between the living and the dead.
Inside the tavern at Dundare, Skellen's mercenaries, men like Cyprian Fripp and Vargas, are bored, drunk, and restless. They are bullying the tavern staff, waiting out the freezing rain.
In the corner of the tavern, there is an old, stinking beggar. To entertain the mercenaries and earn a coin, he is telling local ghost stories.
Right, the lore of Samhain.
Yeah. He says that on this night, witches ride black cats that transform into pitch-black mares. He warns them in this raspy voice that whoever hears the clatter of hooves and sees a hag on a black mare tonight will not shun death.
And the timing is cinematic. At that exact moment, through the howling wind and the freezing rain, they hear the distinct, heavy whinny of a black mare outside the tavern doors.
The mercenaries instantly panic, but their training kicks in, they draw their weapons, they realize it's Ciri, but they fundamentally misunderstand the situation.
They think she's coming out of the cold because she is starving and desperate. They think she is a trapped animal walking into their snare.
But she walks through the door, pulls back her heavy hood, and the entire energy shifts. They see the soot-blackened eyes. They see the hideous, jagged scar running down her face.
She looks at these hardened killers and says calmly, "I'm a witcher. I've come here to kill you." And then she moves.
The sequence is lightning fast and utterly brutal. She doesn't fight them like a noble knight. She fights them with the ruthless efficiency she learned from the Witchers and the raw cruelty she learned from Bonhart.
The perspective of the text shifts here, and it is masterful. We don't see the fight from Ciri's perspective. We experience it from the perspective of the old beggar.
It's so effective.
As soon as the first sword is drawn, the beggar dives under a heavy oak table, clutching the table legs, squeezing his eyes shut in terror. He can't see the choreography of the fight. He can only hear it.
Which forces the reader to focus on the auditory horror.
Exactly.
He hears the clash of steel, the thud of bodies hitting the floorboards, and then he hears this horrific, dissonant duet. He hears a young barmaid screaming in absolute high-pitched terror.
And then Fripp.
And underneath that, he hears Cyprian Fripp. Fripp is a hardened mercenary, a man who kills for a living, but Ciri hacks off his hand, and Fripp collapses to the floor, bleeding out, suddenly weeping and howling for his mother.
It is the complete and utter deconstruction of the tough mercenary trope. Ciri brings them the exact agonizing pain she promised Visigota she would deliver.
She proves her point.
She strips away their armor, their bravado, and their sadism, and leaves them as weeping, terrified children facing the void. She proves her thesis.
And she leaves one man alive, specifically to run back to Skellen and tell him what happened. Which leads us to the ultimate confrontation. Weeks later, deep in the winter, Skellen, Bonhart, Rience, and the heavily armed surviving members of the Hansa finally track Ciri to her destination.
They track her to the shores of a massive frozen lake called Tarnmira. The environment here is the primary antagonist.
Oh, totally.
The lake is vast, completely frozen over, and shrouded in a dense, milky, impenetrable fog.
Visibility is near zero. You can't see 20 paces in front of you. The air is dead silent.
Skellen's men are heavily armed. They have swords, crossbows, heavy winter boots, and thick furs. They find Ciri's footprints in the light dusting of snow covering the ice.
They form a wide skirmish line and begin to walk out onto the lake following the tracks. They believe they are participating in a hunt.
But then, the footprints simply end, right in the middle of the ice.
It is the moment the predator realizes it has stepped into a trap.
The tension is unbearable. They're standing perfectly still in the whiteout fog, and suddenly they hear a sound. It's not a footstep. It is a rhythmic, sharp, metallic, grating noise. Skirk, skirk.
The mercenaries realize too late what is happening. Before she left Visigota's cabin, Ciri took a pair of old, rusty ice skates off the wall. She has weaponized the environment against them.
Let's talk about the physics of fighting on ice. The mercenaries are wearing heavy leather boots with smooth soles. If they swing a heavy broadsword, the momentum of the swing causes them to slip and lose their balance. They cannot plant their feet.
But Ciri, on ice skates, has ultimate mobility and zero friction. She can generate incredible kinetic energy and change direction instantly. In the dense fog, she isn't just a fighter, she is a phantom.
The sensory terror is incredible. The silence is broken only by the grating of steel on ice, circling them in the fog.
It's like a horror movie.
Ciri strikes from the mist at 40 miles an hour. She slices the hamstring of a mercenary, cuts the throat of another, and vanishes back into the whiteout before a single drop of blood hits the ice. She doesn't engage in sword fights. She executes high-speed drive-by amputations. She is systematically dismantling an elite squad of killers.
Panic completely takes over the Hansa. They're firing crossbows blindly into the fog, hitting nothing. Men are screaming. And Rience, the sadistic sorcerer who tortured Yennefer, loses his nerve.
Rience decides to use magic. He tries to cast a fire spell to melt the ice and create a defensive moat of water around his position.
But magic requires immense focus and control. Rience is freezing, terrified, and his hands are trembling violently. He loses control of the chaotic energy.
Instead of casting a controlled horizontal ring of fire, the spell fractures. It cleaves the ice longitudinally, sending massive shockwaves through the frozen surface.
The ice beneath them shatters with the sound of thunder. The heavy mercenaries, unburdened by armor and weapons, plunge directly into the freezing black water beneath the ice. The shock of the cold paralyzes them, and the weight of their armor drags them to the bottom instantly.
Skellen barely manages to drag himself out of the water, scrambling onto a stable sheet of ice. But Rience is not so lucky.
Rience manages to catch the edge of the jagged ice. He is hanging over the black abyss by his fingers. He's freezing, waterlogged, and begging for help. And out of the milky fog, Ciri slowly skates up to him.
She doesn't rush. She has total control of the situation.
She breaks flawlessly on the ice right in front of him. She reaches up, pulls down her heavy woolen scarf to reveal her mangled, scarred face, and she looks down at him. and she smiles.
This is the absolute culmination of her philosophy of vengeance. She's looking at the man who tortured her adoptive mother, the man who hunted her, the man who threatened her life.
She looks into Rance's terrified eyes, and she reminds him of the exact words he spoke to her through the xenogloss back in the village of Unicorn. He had threatened her, saying, "I will teach you pain with these fingers."
The irony is fatal.
What does she do? She doesn't stab him. She simply skates away backward into the fog to build momentum. Then she skates forward at top speed, directly over his hands, her sharp steel blades cleanly severing his 8 fingers.
Wow.
Rian screams, loses his grip, and sinks forever into the freezing black water.
It is brutal, visceral, poetic justice. She has delivered the exact pain she promised, but there is one man left. One man who managed to avoid the shattered ice entirely. Leo Bonhart.
Bonhart is riding his horse along the solid shoreline of the lake. He is chasing Ciri as she skates toward the far edge of Tarn Mera. He knows where she's trying to go. She's looking for Tor Ziriel, the mythical tower of the swallow, an ancient magical teleportation construct.
But when she finally reaches the rocky shore and takes off her skates, the tower is not there. It's a myth. There is nothing but a pile of ancient, barren basalt stones covered in snow.
Bonhart roars in triumph. He thinks he has finally cornered her. The lake is behind her. The dead stones are in front of her. He kicks his horse and rides out onto the thick ice to claim his prize.
But as he approaches, the environment violently shifts. The temperature plummets even further. The fog begins to swirl in unnatural patterns, and the air fills with the smell of ozone and decay.
A spectral cavalcade suddenly appears out of the mist, galloping silently across the ice. It is the Wild Hunt. Skeleton riders encased in rusted ancient armor, riding skeletal horses with glowing eyes.
They are a force of pure, multidimensional chaos.
And a booming telepathic voice echoes directly inside Bonhart's skull. "She is not yours, she is ours. Be gone."
Bonhart is a sociopath, completely immune to human fear. He would gladly fight a phantom. But his horse is an animal. The horse is paralyzed with primal terror. It rears up wildly, slipping on the ice, and its heavy hooves crash down, shattering the ice beneath them.
Bonhart is plunged into the freezing water. He struggles violently, managing to drag his soaking, freezing body out onto the ice. And as he lays there gasping, he looks up and watches the impossible happen.
Space itself begins to fold. From the pile of barren stones, a massive, gleaming basalt tower erupts into existence.
It's out of nowhere.
It doesn't rise from the ground. It materializes, surrounded by a swirling, crackling aurora borealis of raw, magical energy. The Tower of the Swallow has opened for the child of the Elder Blood.
Ciri mounts her horse, Kelpie, and rides into the pitch-black archway of the tower.
We have to analyze the interior of this tower because it represents Ciri stepping entirely out of conventional reality. As she rides in, she isn't riding on stone. The floor is a massive ancient ossuary. Kelpie's hooves are literally crunching and shattering human skulls and rib cages.
It's so symbolic.
It is a visual representation of the death, history, and trauma she is leaving behind.
And the architecture of the tower defies physics. She realizes she isn't just inside a tall building, she is inside a multidimensional polyhedron. Space and time are fractured.
She passes through a corridor of infinite doors. And through these doors, her elder blood allows her to see visions of the past, the present, and the future occurring simultaneously.
She sees her friends. She sees the young priestesses she trained with, girls like Iola and Ernid, marching through freezing mud to act as frontline medics in a brutal military camp.
Which is a brilliant, devastating thematic tie-in to the very beginning of our conversation.
How so?
We started by marveling at King Esterod moving millions of gold bezants and Emperor Emhyr deploying 300,000 troops. But here, in this vision, Ciri sees the actual reality of that grand geopolitics. Young girls wrapping bloody stumps, amputating limbs, and dying of typhus in the freezing mud. It's the true human cost of the chessboard.
She also sees Yennefer. He sees her adoptive mother chained to a cold dungeon wall, bleeding, broken, but still defiant. And she hears a voice in her mind. It is the spirit of Vaisugota, the old hermit. He has just died of a heart attack alone in his cabin. His spirit tells her not to fear. He tells her that her elder blood gives her ultimate dominion over time and space. She's no longer a pawn, she's the master of the worlds.
Having survived the physical realm through sheer brutality, she reaches the culmination of her journey. She transcends the muddy, violent world of spies, bounty hunters, and emperors.
She rides toward a final point of light. She emerges from the dark, bone-filled corridor of the tower into a dazzling, sunlit landscape. It's spring. The air smells intensely bird cherry blossoms and fresh grass.
A total shift in tone.
She sees actual unicorns drinking peacefully from a crystal-clear lake covered in white otter lilies. And sitting on a rock nearby is a fair-haired elf playing a soft melody on a pan flute. The elf lowers the flute, smiles at her, and asks, "What took you so long?"
She has successfully navigated the gauntlet. She has stepped completely off the board.
It is just an incredibly profound journey. To wrap up this deep dive, we have to connect the macro and the micro. We started this episode looking at King Esterod, moving millions of gold pieces, analyzing maritime tax laws, and using religious parables to shape a continent-spanning war.
We did.
And we ended with a single, deeply traumatized teenage girl using a pair of rusty ice skates to shatter the plans of the most dangerous men in the world. You see, power isn't just about the massive armies you command, or the millions you have laundered in the bank, or the chaotic magic you wield.
Not at all.
Sometimes power is simply refusing to be the prey anymore. It's about taking the horrors inflicted upon you, the mud, the blood, and the trauma, and turning them into a lethal weapon.
And that leaves us with a fascinating, almost ironic paradox to consider. Ciri has now stepped outside of her own dimension. She has mastered space and time. But this raises an important question for you, if you're listening, to mull over long after this deep dive ends. If the Emperor of Nilfgaard, the spy masters of Redania, the sociopathic bounty hunters, and the rogue archmages of the world have spent all this blood, gold, and magical energy fighting to control a girl who no longer even exists in their universe, what exactly are they fighting for now?
That is a great question.
They are stranded in the muddy, bloody waters of their own making, fighting a war over an empty chair while she has skated away into eternity.
What an incredible lingering thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this massive journey through the sources. Remember to keep questioning the narratives of power, whether they are handed down by an emperor, whispered by a spy, or debated by a hermit in a swamp. That officially concludes this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.